everybody. I've been asked to talk for about 10 minutes. Can you take 10 minutes? Okay. About this music, about the music that has many names. Most of the ones that are most known are the ones we didn't pick, like jazz. But I'll use that term because we understand it. Actually, when I think about the contours of African American music, for me, it begins on the Middle Passage. And the Middle Passage was the dreaded voyage from Africa as captives to the so-called New World, either to the Caribbean or to the shores of what later became the United States. And this was a horrible, horrible passage. It took from 3 weeks to 3 months, and you were lying down, packed like sardines. They actually drew diagrams so that they could pack as many people as they could into the bottom of the ship. And there was not enough space to sit up. There was no toilets. There were rats running around. It was just a horrible, horrible thing. And many people died on the Middle Passage. Some died not from disease. Some died not from suicide attempts. Some died seemingly for no reason at all. And so some intrepid slaver figured out that if they brought music on the Middle Passage, more people would survive. So it wasn't necessarily a humanitarian thing, it was protecting their investment, good old capitalism. So they took African instruments and forced them to sing and dance. So this is the beginning of African American music. These are African people, and they bring with them all of African culture, but now they're in a new reality. They're entering into modernity through slavery, right? So the modernism, Afro-modernism has a different twist, right? So while you have the Enlightenment and everybody's being a brother, so they wrote us out of humanity. And that is the point of view from which this music begins. It begins as a search for freedom. The United States was in slavery twice as long as it has been out of slavery. So if you want to understand United States culture, you have to understand slavery. And it's one of the shortcomings of our education system that we are afraid to say what happened. And this is where the blues comes in. Because what is the American story of history? The American story is we were seeking freedom, freedom from persecution, freedom from religious persecution, and we came and built a city on the hill. They don't say we built a civilization on genocide, theft of land, and slavery, which is actually the truth. So this is where black music comes in, because it is the thing that teaches us about who we are with the clearest vision. The vision from the bottom is less distorted. And so this is why black music is so important. At the end of slavery, I'm going quickly here, but at the end of slavery, if you ask my father, for instance, he says slavery ended in 1968 because he and my mother were sharecroppers, which meant that they chopped cotton on the same plantations that they did during slavery, and they still didn't get paid for it. And so that's a lot like slavery. But the difference was there was some autonomy with the family and some autonomy with the culture. So in what is called the nadir, the low point of African American history, the 1890s, when they had the most lynchings and they disenfranchised black people, they treated us worse than you could treat dogs. You go to jail for doing to dogs what you could do to black people. 3 internationally significant music forms were born: ragtime, the blues, and jazz. And these things took over the world. The whole world said there's something new coming from the United States. which up until then had been a second-rate backwater of Europe. But black people put them into the forefront of modern culture through this music. So, again, the blues is non-sentimental, right? It's based upon the premise. So American pop is boy meets girl, fall in love, and forever after going to the sunset. The blues says, any woman, including yours, might be untrue. Any man, even your man, might be untrue. So this is a different way of looking at the world. And this is the type of nitty-gritty truth-seeking that this music brings. So the Afro-American Liberation Suite was composed in 1970. And that's a very high point of our culture, very important time. We talk about the iconic 60s, but if you study it, you realize when people say the 60s, what they really mean is the late 60s, early 70s. That's what they're talking about. And so this was the time of the Black Arts Movement. This is the time when black artists, and especially black musicians, had the least obedience to European norms. It's when they were the most courageous in saying, black is beautiful, I'm black and I'm proud, and I can play this way, and maybe I can take my cues from the liberation movements in Africa and Latin America and Asia. Maybe I don't have to prove that I can be decorous in the way that Euro-America demands of me. And a lot of people didn't like this, but the people wrote the music anyway. And so what we're going to play for you tonight is one of the gems, one of the absolute masterpieces of that time by Mr. Cal Massey, who was a wonderful, wonderful composer and an important composer. And he's been neglected because he was a revolutionary. He didn't kiss ass. He didn't participate in the rat race. You know how they do musicians. They throw a crumb, and then they say, okay, may the best man win. And then all kind of silliness happens. But Cal Massey wasn't one of those. And instead, he wrote this music. And so I'm going to end with that because I agree with Cornel West, who says that there's nothing that you can say about music that is as sublime as the music itself. So I'm going to stop.
Thank you, Salim. It's my great pleasure to